Miss Collier explains!
Decimals and percentages.
Today, our learning intentions are to understand the meaning of percent and to be able to convert between percentages and decimals. We will know we are successful when we can convert a percentage to a decimal and a decimal to a percentage. Now we're going to look at decimals and percentages and the relationship between them. Percentages and decimals in everyday life. A restaurant uses only part of some vegetables, such as broccoli, capsicum, and cabbage. The vegetable order can be increased by 15% so that 1.15 kilograms is purchased for every 1 kilogram of vegetables that they want to cook. Let's quickly recap percentages. We said that the word percent comes from the Latin word percentum, which means out of 100. This means that percentages give us an idea of a proportion of how much of a total we have or don't have. For example, if a newspaper states that 2,000 people want a council swimming pool to be constructed, then we know how many people want the pool, but we don't know what proportion of the community that is. However, if there was 2,500 people in the community, the newspaper could state that 80% of people want the swimming pool. This then tells us that a majority of the people want the pool. So the percentages give us a proportion of the total. So decimals and percentages can actually be used to translate the same piece of information. They are used to show numbers that are not whole numbers. When we convert between them, there's one thing that we need to remember. For decimals, one whole is 1.00, whereas a whole for percentages is 100%. So when we're converting between decimals and percentages, all we need to think is how do we get from the 1 to the 100 and how do we get from 100 to 1? Let's think about converting from percentages to decimals. How do we get from this 100 to 1? Well, we divide by 100. So whenever we want to convert a percentage to a decimal, we divide by 100. So I have 42% divided by 100. Now, whenever we divide by 100, our decimal place moves 2 spots to the left. Remembering that the decimal is not actually moving, the numbers are moving around the decimal, but to our eyes, it looks like the decimal moved. So currently, my decimal is right here after the 2. When I divide by 100, I move 2 to the left. 1, 2. It's now here. So that means that 42% converted into a decimal equals 0.42. Now let's think about converting decimals to percentages. How do I get from 1 to 100? Well, that's times by 100. So if I have the number 0.654, all I have to do is times by 100 to turn it into a percent. Now when we multiply by 100, the decimal place is moving 2 spots to the right. So currently it's here and I'm moving 1, 2. So my answer is 65.4, and now that I've converted it, it is now a percentage, 65.4%. Once you have converted, I want you to check 2 things for the reasonableness. First of all, when we divide by 100, the number should be getting smaller. 0.42 is smaller than 42. That makes sense. Timesing by 100, the number should get bigger. 65 is bigger than 0.65. So that's my first reasonable check. Another quick check we can always do to check if it's reasonable is to just remember that 100% is the 1 in the units and then 2 zeros after. There's 100, that's 42. That looks pretty right. This is 100. So then 65 looks right underneath there. Let's convert percentages to decimals. The question says express the following percentage as decimals. So I'm writing A and I've got 30%. To turn a percentage into a decimal, I divide by 100. So I'm writing divide by 100. That moves the decimal place 2 spots. If you need to draw it, you can. Otherwise, you can just write the answer. 1, 2. That equals 0.3. B. 240% divided by 100. I'm moving the decimal place 1, 2 equals 2.4. That makes sense to me because 240% is larger than 100% and 2 is larger than 1. C is 12.5% divided by 100. Moving the decimal place 2 to give me 0.125. And lastly, D, 0.4% divided by 100. Here I'm moving the decimal place 2 spots, and if there's any blanks, I'm adding in that 0, which is going to leave me with 0.004. So to convert a percentage to a decimal, we just divide by 100 and move the decimal place 2 to the left. You try to convert some percentages to decimals. Let's quickly check your answers. 92%, I'm dividing by 100, moving the decimal 2 to the left to give me 0.92. 150% divide by 100, move to give me 1.5, which makes sense because 150% is larger than 100%, so that's larger than 1. 7.6 divide by 100 equals 0.076. And D, divide by 100, I'm moving 2 to the left, and 1, 2 equals 0.0005. Now let's work backwards and convert from decimals to percentages. It says express the following decimals as percentages. Firstly, I'm writing out my question, 0.045. Now to convert from a decimal to a percentage, that's from 1 to 100, so I'm timesing by 100, which means my decimal place is moving towards the right. You can draw it if you need to, otherwise you can go straight to the answer, 1, 2. That equals 4.5. Now it's a percentage, so I must remember my percentage sign. Always good to check the answer and check what you've converted it to. That also seems reasonable because 4.5 is a small percentage and that 4 is down in the hundredths. B, 7.2. Now I'm timesing by 100, which means the decimal is moving 1, 2. Remembering if I've got a gap, I'm filling it in with a 0. So that equals 720, and now I've converted it to a percentage, so I need the percentage sign. This seems reasonable because 1 is 100%, so 7 would make sense to be 720%. So remember, when we convert from decimals to percentage, we're multiplying by 100 and moving the decimal 2 places to the right. You try convert these decimals to percentages. Let's quickly check your answers. So converting from decimals to percentages is times by 100, which means my decimal place is moving 2 to the right, which here is leaving me with 70.3. And it's a percentage, so I need the percentage sign. B, 23.1. Converting to a percentage is timesing by 100, and I'm moving that decimal place to 1, 2, filling in any gaps with a 0. And that is leaving me with 2,310%. That does seem reasonable. 1 is 100%, so 23 makes sense to be 2,300%. I hope now you can see how easy it is to convert between decimals and percentages.